We've got some excellent speakers lined up for today, and I'll tell you a bit about them. Erin Boyle, the executive director of CHOW, an organization that supports wellness within the hospitality industry and improves lives through shared stories, skills, and resources. Jen Kendrick, senior director of community engagement at Giving Kitchen. Jen co-founded the organization with her late husband, Ryan, to provide emergency assistance to food service workers through financial support and a network of community resources. Bob and Mulvaney, the owner and partner of Mulvaney B&L, a Michelin-rated farm-to-fork restaurant in Sacramento. Bobbin has 45 years of hospitality experience under her belt. She co-founded I Got Your Back after a sudden rash of suicides and overdoses hit her local restaurant industry hard, beginning in late 2018. And our moderator is Kate Washington, author of Already Toast, Caregiving and Burnout in America. Kate is a frequent speaker on the systemic challenges facing family caregivers. I first got to know Kate when she was involved with a Reimagine event back in 2021. She appeared as a guest in Last Suppers with filmmaker Kirsten Johnson, and she's worked as a food writer and a dining critic. And I encourage you to read their complete bios in the event listing. I'll also be pasting some information about them in the chat. And after our discussion, roughly around the hour, we'll have a Q&A. And please use the chat to post your questions. I'm going to try to help feed those to Kate and our speakers. So to kick this off, I'm going to ask our guests two questions. The first one is just going to be a short answer. What is your go-to meal when you want to provide comfort and care to a loved one? And then the second part of my questions to all of you, can you tell us a bit about yourself and why you started your project to reimagine restaurant culture? So it's going to be brief, 3 minutes each if you can. So I'm going to start with Jen.
Hi. Hello, I am honored to be here today. Thank you, Andy, for that amazing introduction. My name is Jen Heidinger Kendrick, and as Andy said, I am a co-founder of Giving Kitchen. And what Giving Kitchen does is a nonprofit. We help food service workers in crisis. I'll talk about that in a second, but just to answer my go-to meal for caregiving, gosh, this is actually really hard. I was going to skirt the answer and just say, get in the kitchen and do something with your family or loved ones. But I guess I'm going to go to a spaghetti dish. Just a standard kind of all-American spaghetti. It reminds me of my grandparents, me being little and being able to go to my grandparents' home where there was always kind of the top 5 meals that every time I would go to grandma and grandpa's house, I knew I was going to get one of these 5 things. And that just makes me feel at home. I love providing that also for my husband and our baby. And a little bit more about Giving Kitchen and why Giving Kitchen exists today is really the story around what happened to my late chef husband, Ryan Heidinger, and myself. And it was really around his terminal cancer diagnosis in late 2012. And what happened in our community here in Atlanta, Georgia, was something so powerful that it completely just changed our perspective and outlook on humanity, but also really kind of the cultural balance of what is food service. And I truly believe that today. Our community rallied behind us in such a powerful way. A benefit was put on to aid in our in his final year, and what was supposed to raise $25,000 to help us pay our bills ended up collecting community of 1,000 people and some of Atlanta's best restaurants and bartenders who came together, a live auction and a band, and nearly $300,000 later, our minds were blown. And that was really the inspiration about being able to pay it forward for those who serve us in food service every single day. So whether that's through being able to help pay financial expenses for rent and mortgage, all the way to really a warm connection to community resources for food service workers. That's really why Giving Kitchen was born, was again based around that community effort. And Giving Kitchen today menu is able to help any food service worker in the country. We are focused here in the Southeast today. Since inception, we've been able to help nearly 12,000 food service workers and their families to around $8 million in financial aid to those who really need it. And I can't wait to continue sharing a little bit more about what we do.
Thank you, Jen. Next up, we have Erin, your go-to food and a bit about you and Chow.
Hey there. Yeah, thank you all for having me. I'm honored to be here. So as for the food, I just can't pick something without knowing who it's going to be for, because I'd want to tailor it to their comfort. For example, I had a friend whose puppy died, and I make raspberry Linzer bars only during the holiday season, and they're her favorite food. So I made her some Linzer bars for that. So it's all about who the person is, I think, for me to know what I would make for them. So I'm Erin Boyle. I'm with Culinary Hospitality Outreach and Wellness, and I am the executive director. Let's see, I've been in the industry since 1994. I love being a server bartender. I loved being in the kitchen. I am extremely passionate about food and all things cooking. And I love that there's no end to learning in this field. There are so many cultures and cuisines we can explore and techniques to master. However, there are huge issues with our industry and the culture. My last restaurant job personally had me so burnt out and physically sick and lonely that I couldn't return to work, any kind of work, for a month. I work with Chow because I want everyone to have access to mental health and substance use disorder resources, regardless of their income and time constraints. So what Chow does, what our founding purpose was to have group discussion meetings. So we have meetings 8 times a week, one for women, one in Spanish, and the rest are open to everyone. They're all available virtually through Zoom. So all you need is a phone to be able to call in. You can show up however you want. You can have your camera off. You can make up a fake name, whatever you need to get into the room and start having the conversations that we avoid. So maybe something that you can't discuss with your partner or your coworkers that you just want to get off your chest. The great thing about our meetings is that they're not clinical. There's no doctor in the room. And I trust me, I truly believe in therapy. And I've been in therapy for the last 10 years, but the group discussion meetings are a great place to come share, to find support, to hear new ideas, and to create a community. I personally have been around a number of people that have attempted suicide or have died from addiction or overdose. And I just don't want to see that happen because of lack of resources. So Chow is here to provide a space for that. We are also a resource broker. So if there's anything that you need, you can come to us and share what the problem is, and we'll connect you with the right space.
Thank you, Erin. Bobbin, you're next. Bobbin, I can't hear you.
You're on mute, Bobbin.
Bobbin, you did it before.
There's a little microphone icon on the left side.
All right, maybe while Bobbin is figuring this out, I'm going to pass this to you, Kate. I'm going to ask you about your go-to food, maybe this time for a particular person in mind, and then you can tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure, thank you. I actually smiled when Jen mentioned the spaghetti. Oh, I think Bobbin is unmuted. Let's pass it back to her, and I will go next.
I am so sorry. I'm very challenged electronically. I have to say my favorite food is, like everybody else's too. I don't cook anymore. It's been years since I've cooked. So, but what I know is exactly what Erin said. It's whatever that person needs at the moment. Doesn't matter what it is. It's just sitting down and taking the time with them. So that's easy schmeezy. And I happen to have a family that will eat anything. So Our program was I Got Your Back. And like you said, it was inspired out of tragedy. But really what's been important for me throughout my career is that body, mind, spirit connection. And part of that has really developed, Andy said I have 45 years experience in Sacramento. I hated to just start to think that, when did it start? I can remember being 5 years old in my family's 24-hour cafe connected to a country western bar, that I could watch and be an observer and a witness to employees and guests coming in, that interaction that happens, what happens when they all leave again. So throughout my career and working in restaurants, I think I've always been an observer. And what I know about our industry is we can be a bunch of misfits in general, right? It kind of has a pirate culture. And it could be rough and time constraints and all those crazy things that you know about restaurant. But what I knew from my own health challenges and from having my own businesses in hospitality is that a lot of people miss us. A lot of information that people have. We're not 9-to-5ers. We are not going to read a computer. We aren't going to take a survey on a computer. People don't have computers in part of their mise en places. And so sometimes we miss out on all of that. And what I feel really blessed about is that over the past 6 or 7 years now, is that we as a hospitality community across this country said, we have a problem. Our hearts are broken. We can't have this continue. How can we help each other? And people generally just want to help. And we actually started a program that talks about communication from a very basic level and how to change the dynamics in our restaurant, starting with the tool of communication and reaching out and leaning in. And our responsibility is to reach out, but then to give the resources to other organizations. Both of these I absolutely love and get to work with these ladies and share information with them, as well as California Restaurant Association. There are many that are within our reach, but if people don't know they're there, that they're not going to be able to use them. So I feel our responsibility really is just to say everything out loud. Don't hide it anymore. Don't hide when someone walks in the restaurant drunk, right up into their face. And we've kind of adopted that, which isn't up in your face like it used to be, like up in your face and hit the door. Because what we found is we just had to watch people spinning out at another of our friends' restaurants, right? Now we're going to right here get in your face and say, here's your opportunity right now. We're going to give you these resources. We're going to help you get through this. But you have to take those steps. So I just am so proud of our whole country and our hospitality industry for surrounding one another.
Thank you, Bobbin. Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to thank Reimagine for having me. I'm so excited to talk with this amazing panel. And I'll start by saying about the food of comfort. I was going to say I smiled when I heard Jen speak about spaghetti, because we also have a family spaghetti recipe. My grandfather was of Genovese descent, and he had his spaghetti recipe written out in his handwriting. I remember my mother actually saying that when she first traveled in Italy, the spaghetti never tasted right until she got to Genoa. And that is the dish that I make for my children. That is the dish that I would love to have made for me and have not had for many years. But I also, when I take meals to people, I do also tailor it to what they need. A go-to that I've been using lately to take to people is, there's a great recipe in the New York Times for a beef stew with mustard and cognac that's great comfort food. So I recommend that one. A little bit about me. I am the odd one out on this panel in not having been in the restaurant industry. I've been an observer and a critic, I hope a gentle and encouraging critic of it most of the time, as a restaurant reviewer, and also for a long time as a magazine writer, writing features. I've also done a lot of different things in food journalism, including recipe development, long form features, including one that I'm very proud of about the idea of food as medicine and how we feed the sick, that was really inspired by caring for my husband through a stem cell transplant, during which he lost the ability to eat. And it was my job to find foods that would help him relearn to eat. So that's a little bit about me, but what I really want to do is turn to our amazing panelists to talk about the subject of this panel. First, I want to thank you so much for sharing your stories. And to those of us whose main experience of restaurant life is dining in restaurants, it might seem paradoxical that these sites of enjoyment and hospitality, which on a good night can really feel almost magic, hide trauma and challenge in their community of workers in the kitchen when people go home. I'd like to start by asking our panelists why they think hospitality as an industry leaves so many workers so prone to mental health challenges, substance abuse struggles, economic precarity, and even, ironically, food insecurity. I wondered if, Erin, we could start with you and then we'll get a conversation going.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of contributing factors. First off, scarcity mindset. When you're in the restaurant, there's never enough. There's never enough time. There's never enough staff. There's never enough money for raises. There's just never enough. There's no benefits. So that adds to the economic insecurity. Some places are starting to have benefits now, but traditionally there's not a lot of benefits. High employment turnover, especially right now. You can, if somebody is noticing that behavior is strange and bring it up, they can easily quit and walk next door and find another job. There's also traditionally no human resources, so there's no one to go to talk about what's going on. And this is also going to be particularly damaging to the vulnerable folks that work in our industry, immigrants who might be scared of deportation or things like that. There's also pre-existing and concurring issues that people are coming in with, like depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance use. We have easy accessibility to drugs and alcohol. We have little or no access to mental or medical health care. There's high levels of stress, not a lot of incentive for self-care. I mean, a lot of us in the industry have made it heroic to work more and more hours in more and more pain. Like, oh yeah, I left the emergency room an hour ago because I needed to get to work. And I worked 87 hours this week. What, you only worked 60? There's also no drug testing, which, I don't want to create barriers of entry, but it does mean that people don't have to worry about what they're doing recreationally. There's a lot of peer pressure, harassment, and abuse. The work hours are conducive to substance abuse. So if we get off of work between 11 and 2 a.m., what are you going to do? There's no pottery class to jump into at that time. So a lot of us go to substances. And then until recently, there's been little representation in the media about what it's really like to be in this industry. It's been very glamorized on television to be, Gordon Ramsay or one of these other celebrity chefs, but that is not the reality.
That's so interesting. Oh, yes, please go ahead, Jen.
No, I was just going to chime in a little bit. I mean, I think these are realities of what exists in this food service culture. And there's only so many opportunities to kind of, be able to lean into the employees who come in and give themselves so selflessly. I mean, Erin alluded to so many dynamics that are true for this industry. Oftentimes, having our food service workers, check their feelings at the door. Again, as Erin alluded to, this is an industry. It's the second leading. It's actually one of the largest industries against versus the U.S. government being the largest industry, and we are 2 to 3 times more prone for suicide ideation as a food service population. And I think, again, just alluding to a lot of what Erin just said, the culture of food service, there's so many food and beverage workers who will say that they experience isolation at work, or that they don't feel like they can turn to a manager or an owner of an establishment to, let them know about their stress, or they feel like they'll be looked down upon. Mental health resources are not necessarily always available or even touched on as a basic principle of what, caregiving can look like within, the food service establishment. I wanted to chime in just because from a Giving Kitchen standpoint and a nonprofit standpoint, of what this organization, my organization, can do for all of these real circumstances that flood our industry is to be that resource. And I wanted to make sure that I mentioned something that Giving Kitchen does annually, which is focus on mental health. And we have a campaign that we host annually called Giving Kitchen Mind Matters. And both Bob and Erin have been participants for the past couple of years and really sharing their resources to the community as a whole. And I think outside of again, these realities, I think the constant struggle and constant encouragement we have is to continue to talk about it and to say that it is okay to not be okay. Let's just talk about it. And Bob, and you even alluded to that in your opening. So just wanted to throw that out there. Happy to continue that kind of conversation as we continue this dialogue.
Yeah. Bobbin, did you want to speak to what Jen and Erin have discussed?
Yes. First of all, Erin, thank you for describing a Tuesday. I really appreciate that. Because everything you said is spot on, and those are our struggles. And Jen, the leaving it at the door is one of the very first things that I wanted to stop. I was tired of hearing people say, oh, damn, she's just bitching. Oh, he's a dickhead. That ass, sorry, restaurant language. It has to be part of the conversation because we can't not talk about the way we talk, the way we drink, the way we do drugs. We can't address these issues without being honest about who we are. And one of the things that I thought was so important is during COVID, I guess this happened just before COVID. It did happen right before COVID, because what I wanted people to know is, how do you feel when you come in before you get to work? I sent out a survey and asked them, when do you start stressing about coming to work? Some of them said the day before, right? Most said when they're parking their car or driving on their way in. I asked them what they worried about. Then what I did is I made this crazy little mental health check-in box. It's basically a tissue box. I took a tea box and slit a hole in it, and I made a piece of paper with 4 colored pictures of a happy face, a mad face, all is good, and a depressed face, red, yellow, blue, the colors that attached, and cut up some cards of those same color and asked everyone at the check-in POS system, said, please participate in a mental health check-in. Tell me how you feel right now. That's all I want to know, how you feel right now. And the very first time we did it was my favorite time, because there was a red in there. And we were a general staff meeting and someone said, oh, we all know who that is. Well, that's because that chef has been mad for 2-3 years and I'm not really sure. I have to ask him, chef, did your cat piss on your chef pants today? What happened? Why did someone key your car? Do you have a flat tire? Why are you coming in so angry and sharing this with us? So I think what happened was people were starting to realize what they were bringing into the workplace. When you pass this threshold, are you prepared? And what do you drag in with you? And being self-aware was, I think, one of our very first. We're always aware. We're trying to anticipate your next move, what you need next, right? What is your next need? Is your coffee hot enough? Is your iced tea cold enough? We're aware of what our guests need, but not always about ourselves. And so that's kind of, I like to say that I'm so glad for all these smart people who build these great programs and all these detailed information. But really all I've been trying to focus on for the last 6 or so years is that 4 inches between the bottom of my cowboy boots and that concrete floor that I walk on every single night. So I really try to stay focused on that, on the moment.
I applaud you, Bobbin, because it is that self-awareness, that awareness in general, but it's also about how you as a restaurant culture are changing that minute to minute human interaction and being mindful of actually how a human is feeling. And that's going to in turn relate to the customer experience. It's always going to start with that employee and how they're
for
feeling. I applaud you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bob. And you actually led right into the next question that I wanted to ask you, was about the mental health check-ins that you piloted. And I love the way you describe it as so simple and accessible. It actually reminds me, I don't know if any of you have seen the pain scales that doctors' offices use for people. Like people can say a 1 to 10, but if they are little kids or, not comfortable with using numerals, there's just happy face and sad face, and they can point to the different colors of faces. And I think that having that really accessible, really non-judgmental approach can do so much to change. And so I would love to ask you, Bobbin, about what change you've seen in the restaurant culture with piloting that. Like, how has it played out different nights going forward? And how do you see, do you think that's scalable to other restaurants? Would you like to see other places implement that? How could that kind of just really simple check-in be expanded and have a wider impact?
100% expandable. We've talked to firefighters, police officers, schools, sporting team, and it's such an easy thing. When you think about it, it's just colored pieces of paper. And when we do the roll call, when we go, start the beginning of the shift, we then in front of everybody open it up and we say, hey, we have 9 yellows. That's all great. Everyone's happy today. It's all good. Hey, we got a few greens. It looks like we have 3 reds. Wow, something may have happened here last night. I do hope we get some conflict resolution on that. If you'll all, talk to your peer or your supervisor, and let's try to get this worked out tonight. And we have 1 blue amongst us. So we can say in front of everyone, please treat everyone as if they were blue today. Treat yourself. How would you like to be treated? Treat them like that. Where before we might have just said, hey, buck up, Buttercup, get your ass behind the line, right? Wipe those tears. There's no room for crying right now. But now I would say, hey, hit the walk-in, scream, go wash your face in the bathroom, take a quick one around the block. I got you covered. Come back into it. So I think it's compassion and the empathy part needed to be taught. And I think that this helps teach that. Now, what I thought was brilliant, this is what I did during COVID when I had a lot of 3:30 in the morning worrying nights, what am I going to be doing, is that I thought it's really more of a language problem. And again, I wanted people to use real words, like not they are moody, but wow, she seems very sad, or he's very mad. Those words really help. So I start what was called a common knowledge mise en place. I called it common knowledge because I realized some people went to university, some people, this is their second language, and some people didn't, I don't think, made it through high school. Some are in high school, first-time jobs, all kinds of different people. I myself couldn't finish college. I'm severely dyslexic, but I've been able to work my way up through this industry by good work ethics and all, that. And there's a lot of people like me in my industry that I love. You don't need a BA. You really need to have great work ethics, be able to figure things out. So there's a lot of creative people in my industry. So I started this common knowledge mise en place, and a mise en place is a chef's little things that are in place. Put your things in place. It's everything the chef's going to need all night long within his shoulder, and be 1 step behind him and 1 step to the side. Now they're ready for anything coming in the door. I wanted everyone to be ready with common knowledge for whatever came at them. Aggressive people, people, different types of behaviors that people are using. If you think we have a communication problem, that might tell me that you are not active listening. So what I did is I probably on my 13th word now, which now include respect, judgment, intention, mindfulness, balance. Every 2 weeks, I would give them this mise en place with their paycheck, and it would give us the 2 weeks to talk about it as a group in your departments. What does respect mean to you? For a back waiter, it's disrespectful for another back waiter to walk across the room with empty hands. And it's going to make somebody mad, and it's going to make them resentful, and it's going to make them start bad mouthing someone and not working with them. But isn't it better to say, I feel disrespected when you are not helping get all these dishes in this room into that kitchen? It has to be done by the end of the night. So it was just these crazy little things. But now everybody has signed off to say, we agree in this language together. So now instead of hearing drug talk and party talk, I might hear about what drug someone's taking, as in Prozac or Xanax or the prescribed drugs, and their counseling appointments and their groups. I hear people saying, he's not active listening to me, which is so much easier for me to deal with if I actually know the problem is, and not just that somebody's being a dickhead. That leaves a lot of interpretation. So that's where I am now, and I'm continuing to work on building my mise en place. Seems simple, but it's made a dramatic difference in our workplace.
That's fabulous, and I love the use of culinary and kitchen terms to build the program. Sorry, Erin, did you have a response?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump. Chow also does a check-in that is more complicated, I think, than Bobbin's, and I'm constantly re-looking at it because we do ours on a scale of rare to well done. Rare meaning juicy, full of life, able to take on more cooking. Well done being left on the grill too long, dried out, can't take any more.
Fried.
And we, and then within that, we share a picture that has a list of words, because we often have more words for our food than we do for our feelings. So what does rare mean? And then we list like 10 words that like could be happening there, or well done. Maybe you're feeling lonely or desperate or just completely fried. So that gives folks a moment to check in. And we've had restaurants try this at work. In our meetings, we ask for a little bit more detail, like why are you feeling the way you're feeling? But in a work setting, we just, in pre-meal, pre-shift, we just ask people to share what they are on a scale of rare to well done. Don't have to give any details, but at least then, like Bobbin was saying, Jen's not just being a dick today. She checked in as well done. I'm going to give her some grace and some space. and
Good to know.
And we've heard from a lot of the groups, the restaurant groups that are doing this, that it has created a lot of empathy. That said, a lot of the owners and management are telling us that they're not comfortable with sharing their actual temperature. And I know that is extremely hard. And I want to say that, I was a chef for 15 years and now I'm running a nonprofit, and we do these check-ins on our team. And I'm finding the more honest I am, and again, I don't need to share details. I just can say, today I'm well done. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be a badass. I'm still going to do my job very well. I'm just doing it at a well done. And I've noticed that it gives my team the opportunity to stand up and to step up and say, hey, if you're well done, can I do this for you? I saw that you have this. And I think it's been really powerful for me as someone who's a control freak chef that wouldn't allow people to help, to see that being human and open and vulnerable can open a lot of pathways to improving any workspace.
Fantastic. Jen, how do you see this operating in the mental health work you do?
I love it. I think from a organizational standpoint, an opportunity that Giving Kitchen has as a tool for those who work in food service. I have no idea how many are listening in today who actually work in food service. But you know, we at givingkitchen.org, we actually have a food service worker info hub. So it's a one-stop kind of page that can give all of these opportunities to share for access to either our financial assistance program or our stability network program or other resources. Again, I mentioned a little bit about one campaign that we focus on heavily throughout the year, throughout the month of May, which is Giving Kitchen's Mind Matters. So it's our opportunity to really dive into subject matter experts within the fields of mental health and awareness and anything surrounding that, from HR practices to mindful breathing to all of those things that really can help us improve our kind of our daily mental life. And again, we pair with experts who talk about all of that, and we publicize that throughout the month of May. It's a national campaign. So that's another tool to, again, share the realities of what we're talking about today. And also just, again, the reminder of that it's okay to not be okay. By simply talking about it can help us kind of in our daily lives. I know that we also have a program that we've partnered with called QPR. It's the Question, Persuade, Refer. It is a suicide prevention training online. And Giving Kitchen and the QPR Institute partnered up several years ago. And we will offer that 45-minute
Oh my
prevention
God.
training class free to any food service worker in the United States. All you have to do is just go to Giving Kitchen, find the link, and then get a code, and it's a 45-minute class. I will say that based off the information and data we've collected over the last few years, it's a 98% success rate in those who have taken the course, feeling empowered to identify if somebody is contemplating suicide, identifying that, and being able to simply say, I have a resource I can send you to immediately. And it has a 98% success rate in those who are contemplating suicide by preventing it. And I think, again, just one of the many tools that as an organization we can provide that surrounds, again, these discussions that we're talking about right now.
I love that.
Mm.
Honestly, Jen, that is so huge. 6 or more years ago, when we were trying to train our peers, the only training we could get was over 24 hours of training.
Oh.
And we tried to get it down to even 8 hours. But in working with our mental health professionals, they could not do that for us. And so we just needed to learn that language. It's once you learn how to ask someone, are you thinking about suicide? Do you have a plan?
Yep.
You have to say, I honestly, this week in giving a review to someone, found out that her losing a responsibility that we gave her because she was not stepping up to it, because she just bought a new house. She got married last weekend, bought the house 2 months ago, has 2 small children. It was too much for her. She tells me in the review, I want you to know that I was having suicidal idealization, which I had to then just reach out to her. And I asked her, how do you feel now? And do you have a plan? The fact that she would just say it in a review blessed my heart. But to know that she even struggled 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we were making this decision with her, you know, it breaks my heart as well, because we really felt that we were making her life maybe just a little bit easier, but she felt she was failing.
Wow, that's really powerful. I really appreciate this discussion about mental health, and I'm sure, you know, many of our participants have seen these issues at play in their personal lives as well as in their work lives. I want to expand the discussion. We've been talking quite a bit about mental health and suicidality, which are kind of the heart of for each individual worker, but larger systemic challenges, worker poverty, crises, and other issues that hospitality industry workers face are so ripe for redress. And I wondered, Jen, if maybe you could speak a little bit to the critical needs and difficulties that you see in the populations that you serve. Like, what are people reaching out for with their big needs?
Sure. We know based off our own research that most Americans can't afford $1,000 unexpected expense. Most Americans. For food service, it's $400 to $600 of an added expense per month will send them into a downward spiral facing a potential eviction. We know that eviction and leading to that eviction increases the probability of a mental health crisis by nearly 10%. And 88% of children who experience eviction will screen for a mental health disorder. So in the work that we do surrounding food service, it is, through our financial aid program, which I just want to talk about that a little bit. What we classify food service as anyone working in restaurants, fast food, quick service, catering, concessions, food trucks, bars, tap rooms, anybody in that world. They can come to Giving Kitchen if there is a crisis, i.e. illness, injury, death of an immediate family member, or a housing disaster like a flood or fire. They go to givingkitchen.org, ask for help. It's top of line. It's a form that they fill out. It pipeline them to a case manager. There's some back and forth. And as long as the qualified documentation is put in, doctor's notes, fire department list, whatever it is, Giving Kitchen can oftentimes pay for 3 or 4 months of basic living expenses, rent and utilities for a food service worker, again, for about 3 or 4 months. And within about 14 days from the time a client comes to Giving Kitchen to the time that we would turn around and offer that financial assistance is within about 12 to 14 days. We take, as an organization, intake pre and post surveys of all of our cases and our clients. And as you relate it to knowing that at any given moment, there's going to be, if a food service worker, again, is faced with a $400, $500, $600 bill that they weren't anticipating, that their depression and mental health scores are plummeting. Giving Kitchen will step in. We can help pay for, financial aid and their rent and mortgage for 3 or 4 months. And then we take that post survey, check in back in on that mental health, those scores. And we have seen through that work over the past 5+ years that 72% of the financial assistance clients that we are serving will say that we help prevent an eviction, that they were able to not skip a meal in order to pay a bill. Instead, they were able to keep food in the refrigerator for their 2 or 3 children that live at home, not, plus a spouse or a partner of some sort. So, we take a look at, the reality of anything that could come to a food service worker's, plate to really set them, one paycheck away from literal eviction, and then what those excess costs will be on top of it. It's a pretty big mountain to climb.
And I just wanted to jump in because my focus is mental health and substance use. However, we can't address those issues if people aren't feeling financially secure. Like, there's no way that somebody is going to have the bandwidth to come to a meeting or to take an educational course for self-improvement if they don't know if they're going to be able to pay their rent. So I love what the Giving Kitchen is doing, and we refer to you guys often. I know I personally have been in places where it's, do I feed the dog or do I have electricity this month? And maybe things like this existed, but I didn't know about it. So I think everyone here listening, it's super important to take all the information that you're hearing today and share with people, because we cannot help people if they don't know that we exist.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We've been talking about kind of the context of the individuals that need the help quite a bit. And that's often the way post-traumatic growth, which is kind of the underlying theme here today, is thought of. We've heard a bunch of, I love the inspiring stories of how our panelists are helping people change. In the past year, we even saw this intense and realistic depiction of kind of some post-traumatic growth on an individual level. If anybody watched the television show The Bear, I was thinking of it when Erin mentioned, that we hadn't seen a lot of realistic depictions of the restaurant industry. And that was, I thought, a very interesting one. But I want to sort of expand out a little bit to think about how we can apply the concept of post-traumatic regrowth to groups, the culture, we've talked some about changing restaurant culture, and to the whole industry, which really has suffered a collective trauma around the pandemic. I think that's kind of an underlying challenge and trauma that has affected the restaurant industry and hospitality industry disproportionately. So I wondered if you all could speak a little bit to collective action and change after those upheavals. I don't know if anybody would like to start.
I'll just make a brief comment about before the pandemic, your restaurant was your family. And that's how we talked about each other. And then the day things shut down, we lost our families, we lost our purpose, we lost our identities. If I'm not a chef and I'm not working, what am I doing? If I'm, what do I do with my time? And I think that we aren't even beginning to understand the impact of that collective trauma. And we're all really distrustful of our employers, our family, and just the state of the world. Like we can't expect anything anymore. Everything is subject to change at any moment. And I think that trauma is, again, it hasn't been even started to be addressed. Sorry, I just, that just really sticks with me. I know at least when I was furloughed, I mean, I still haven't been contacted about coming back because the place that I was working doesn't know if they're willing to do that kind of work anymore. So it's just, I mean, it makes us all feel very disposable.
Yeah. To pick up from what Erin just said, I think the bear is a really interesting, kind of modern recent thing that this world can kind of relate to, I guess. And at Giving Kitchen, we've got 26 or so teammates, and a third more half of us probably have, again, a partner, a significant other, whatever, who has also worked in food service, but we're all a nonprofit now. And I actually asked a few people this, and I was like, did everybody watch the show? And there are a few of my teammates who have been in food service for a very long time who said, I didn't watch it. I started to watch it, but it was a couple of people, there were so many scenes that, that made them think back to the kind of the collective trauma that is inside a kitchen or inside the four walls, oftentimes of establishments. And so it was really hard for them to watch it. And I actually really appreciated that he was like, I kind of had to put the brakes on it and I didn't watch it. And so I think this is just part of the collective of the conversation, is about how to kind of lessen that burden a little bit. I know, I think it was something, I'm looking at my notes, nearly 41% reported of like the general public reported a mental health or behavioral health condition after the onset of the pandemic. But for food service workers who didn't lose their job, they were actually worse off, which I found shocking. They had a much higher rate of psychological distress and or drug and alcohol abuse by staying in their job. Now, again, think about what 2020 did to us as a collective, human race. It is a little bit better now. And again, I think we're just talking about, ritualized behaviors and patterns and culture, and how, a little bit of that shift can happen with, some of these resources that we're talking about, which is really kind of what's going to do that more broad scale change over time.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm one of the people that I watched the trailer for The Bear, and I had work nightmares for the next 2 weeks. So I'm like, no, I guess. And I just put it in the chat. We've been trying to get them to add trigger warnings and resource links.
Smart.
So if anyone has any connections with the good people that make The Bear, we would love to have them add all of our resources.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I had actually seen, because I'm, friends on social media with a number of chefs, I saw discussions where a number of chefs also said, like, nope, not going to watch it, watch the first bit. I also thought back, Erin, to your comment about Gordon Ramsay and it made me think of the abuse and yelling in kitchens, which is very vividly depicted in that show, in The Bear. But one of the reasons I mentioned it, there is some regrowth shown, but you do have to get through a lot of intense things too. So yes, indeed, watch with caution.
I'm a big fan, by the way.
Pardon?
I'm a big fan. And to me, yeah, there is trauma in it, but it's really real. And I feel he's being authentic. He came from one of my favorite restaurants in the country, Alinea, which I know I know the struggle that's in his head, how he wants it to be, but he's in the middle of a shit show and he can't express himself or do what he knows needs to be done. And that struggle for me and watching him figure this out is just, and the crazy things that happen, it's true. It's so much like our real life. I want to mention with the trauma is I feel like when it's not just COVID, I feel like we got hit with the Me Too movement. And then before it, I really feel that it got, I don't want to say resolved, not to resolve, but that the Me Too movement, we had some healing going on in our industry, that then we were hit with COVID and with political separation, and all of this just took a disconnection away from us into a momentum that I wished that we had. And so I feel like I'm still struggling to try to make sense out of nonsense or about all this stuff to be able to communicate it. I think that the food insecurity part was really important to me too, because that's what keeps people together and that's what brings people in. And if you want to have a conversation, you do it over a cup of tea and a muffin. My very first comment when we knew we were going to be closed was, well, we're going to have a family meal every day, right? How are people going to eat every day?
Right.
And then my husband's like, they can't come back here at 2:30 every day, Bob, and they can't. So we ended up having a pickup family meal once a week on Friday that got them through 2 or 3 days with everything they needed in toilet paper. So I just wanted to bring in, but I want to tell you where I kind of feel today, which is different than even 3 weeks ago. When the COVID hit, we had to close our sweet little tiny restaurant in a brick firehouse and move it basically next door to our event center because we needed more space on the days that we weren't outside. If we were able to be inside on the times we could open inside, it was bigger, more spacious, or we were on the sidewalk. But we had been out of that building for over 3 years, other than very small events or working in it, because our kitchen is in there and it's an open kitchen. And it was actually my daughter who said, Mom, the restaurant's happiest when it's in the restaurant. We are stressing people out. We're making them walk a block with a double pork chop to get to the other space. And it's cold and it's just all these nightmares every day. And I don't know what was holding me back, worrying about the pandemic hitting us, closing down again, whatever it was. But the minute that we said it, we were able within 2 weeks to move the restaurant back into where it belongs. And I'm telling you, I was there last night and my heart was so happy. It was humming like a family, all so happy to be back together between clients and employees and all of us. So I'm feeling hope now and not fear.
Well, that is a beautiful note to end our formal discussion on, and maybe pivot to questions from our participants. And I can pull some out of the chat, and in the group, if people would like to ask their own questions, I can also call on people if you put a hand up. So let me see. Let's see if we have.
Kate, I did notice
Yes.
a statement, which isn't exactly a question, but I'm wondering if we can turn
Sure.
it into a question. But Jenna, who's been very active, clapping and hearting the whole way, Jenna is here. Actually, Jenna, maybe if you'd be willing to unmute and sort of reframe your question. I think that's an interesting one about these check-ins and avoiding toxic positivity. So maybe if you want to ask that, go ahead. If you have another question, feel free.
I just want to say that I appreciate all the work everyone is doing, and I've just been, and like, I'm not currently in the restaurant industry. I'm in the design field, and I'm looking at improving experiences for people. But I have been in the kitchen, you know, in those service spaces, but just big appreciation to all the work and awareness everyone's bringing, and all the heart that everyone's putting into the work. I don't know how to form it into a question quite. Maybe Kate can help, but it's just, I started noticing, you know, if people are asked to check in, then, you know, from that moment of examining, you know, how they check in or what they say, you know, just, it starts to touch into the safety or trust, or like, I also heard people speak to what amount of themselves, like even especially as managers, can one bring in. And so I think that when we're touching into those vulnerable spaces, and then, you know, safety, it's like, okay, we have, you know, X number of people who are happy, but like anger or sadness, I just watched Inside Out with my family. It's like we were permitted to be angry and sad, right? So just a little bit of inquiry there, you know. It's not a question yet still, sorry.
Yeah, I guess if I may expand a little bit, I think maybe the underlying question is, and I think anonymity may play a key role in this, not to, you know, nudge the answer in any particular direction, but, you know, how do we keep from pushing people to say that they're okay, or to feel like they should say that they're okay in the check-ins, if the goal is to create a more positive culture and people are seeing that the culture is, you know, that the individuals are having rough days, you know, this, I think it's the role of the leader or the person running the program. But Bobbin, maybe you could speak to that, you know, about how you've created an accepting environment that allows space, not just for like, oh, I better be a positive check-in today so that I'm like a happy force in the kitchen. So if you wanted to.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't had that problem. And I was really, really specific about this. And we went into a pilot with a bunch of really smart people, and we had an issue about this. In my box, I only had the colors and the happy and the faces. When it went into pilot, they put the face in a few different languages, a description of what that meant. You're not going to get a gut check if you're thinking about all that stuff. It is just simply a gut check. And the box is put where people check in. So it's a totally anonymous thing. It's right there. You just drop it in. I think that it made, and I found from the surveys afterwards, is that people felt more connected with one another. I think that vulnerability is, you know, such a gift to give to other people, and to not show that you are feeling vulnerable, or to showing that, you know, you have two expressions, I'm happy or I'm mad. You know, it gives us more room. I think it gives us more room and more room for other people.
And I think it has to like the leadership and the culture drivers of the restaurant, and by that I mean the people who might not be managers but really are the heart of the restaurant. Those folks need to participate with authenticity, right?
Yes.
You can't say that you want to do this and then again have a manager or owner that's checking in every day as rare or happy, because that's going to set the stage for, well, I guess I need to be rare. I need to be rare or happy every day. So role modeling and showing people that, again, you can still be not okay and do your job well.
I'm interested in this comment in the chat. It's not quite a question, but I'm going to turn it into one, if that's okay, from Amy Benjamin, who notes that it strikes her that it's probably not coincidental that all three of our panelists are women, and wondering about the goal of improved healing, communication, openness, vulnerability in environments that are still so male dominated and may have a lingering toxic masculinity. You know, we've talked, a lot of what we've been talking about is kind of improving emotional intelligence in the restaurant industry in some ways. So I wonder if anyone wanted to speak to that.
So I can say that Chow is working on having a men's meeting, because we've gotten feedback that we have the women's meeting, and I personally, that's my favorite meeting. And what we've seen is that there are more men that are completing suicide, and they have less places to go, safe places. And even the open meetings that are available to everyone, it has a different feel when it's a women's group. So I imagine it probably has a different feel when it's a men's group. That said, I think there are more men that are starting to come around to this. And even if they're not from the mental health perspective or their own personal care, or the care of their employees, if you look at the bottom line, mental health is going to improve your financial stability of your restaurant. So even if you're like, this whole mental health thing is all hooey, it's going to save you money if you invest into some mental health practices.
I'll say from a Giving Kitchen perspective, the the majority of the food service workers that Giving Kitchen helps is actually women. And that is directly correlated to the fact that, and as one example, during the pandemic, the heightened part of the pandemic, most of the people that we were helping were women, because they were the ones who were taking the back seat and not going to work to be the full-time caregivers for the children at home. I know, as a widow myself, I lost my late husband when I was 30, he was 35. I specifically did not go to business school or take any sort of speech classes because I was deathly afraid of talking in public when I was younger. But I found such a cathartic opportunity in storytelling and talking about my own experience and journey with losing my best friend and husband, and going through death and cancer all around the circle of food service, and all how that related to how the community uplifted us. And truly, like I said earlier, just really changed our outlook. And it was in my own storytelling that provided me personally just some of the most therapeutic opportunities. And I know that at the core of what Giving Kitchen does today is based off that vulnerability and that opportunity, to meet someone where they are at the right time. And that's all based around, empathy. So I think when we talk about, it doesn't surprise me either that the panelists today are all women, because that it is just kind of the reality of what we see every day. I think I'm most encouraged by the fact that we aren't afraid, and that we are afraid, but we have a sense of pride in order to be able to share, because at our core, oftentimes, we really are the caregivers for not only our families and our loved ones, but for, those that we work with, to empower and to, uplift in their time. So, don't really know if that's an answer to anything, but just more of kind of a thought.
Can I tell you what I find to be true? One of the reasons that when we do the common knowledge mise en place, and we send it out every 2 weeks with the paycheck, so that we have 2 weeks to talk about it. So our leadership team can talk about it all together. And then those people can take that back to their departments, or me, I might at a spur of the moment in that 2 weeks see that I've got a bunch of back waiters and there's 15 minutes. Hey guys, let's sit down. Hey, let's talk about, what does balance mean? What, you need time to play the guitar, you need to work more, whatever it is. What does balance need? I find that these little small sit downs, either one-on-one or with the very small groups, are so much better for the men. Because absolutely, when if you're going to talk about, basically body, mind, spirit stuff, that most of the men are going to be quiet and not join into the conversation about how they feel. They're not ready to be vulnerable yet.
Yeah. We have a question from Rona about how to include owners who closed their restaurants in the conversation about post-traumatic regrowth and in kind of framing the industry. I don't know if anyone has a.
What does that mean? What will you say that again?
So if people have had to leave due to the pandemic, how can we capture that knowledge or learn from the challenge in order to move toward kind of a post-traumatic regrowth?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm living it, man.
Okay. Let's see. Another question from Lily is, what besides saying thank you and great service would hospitality teams like to hear from patrons that could feel helpful and could, increase the better culture of the restaurant? So what can the general public say? Okay, I see some.
I'm excited about this one because I would say, as a patron to a food service worker, this is literally part of my passion and my job, is to say, hey, do you know about Giving Kitchen and what Giving Kitchen can do for you? Hey, do you know about Chow? Hey, do you know about I've Got Your Back? That's exactly what I want patrons to do to food service workers every single time they go out to eat. Share it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I also would love to live in a world where people were as conscientious and caring about the sustainability of the humans that are working and serving them as they are for where the food comes from. We've had the farm to table movement and all the talk about sustainability. And I think the next step, I really want to see people bragging about, hey, I went to this restaurant that has fair wages for everyone, sick days, PTO. The food was great. The service was great, but including that into the conversation.
And I have one of my issues is judgment and criticism and critique. And so I feel that restaurants are a place that everyone comes in and they're an expert. They're actually an expert on everything they eat. They know what is the right amount of salt, and that is absolutely right. But honestly, we don't go into our lawyer's office and go, why did they pick that artwork? That lighting is terrible. It's loud in here. I will have to tell all of you that restaurants are very quiet when y'all aren't in there. So you're bringing that loud in with you. Nothing we can do about that. So I would hope that people would just enjoy your experience for going in, getting good service, getting good food, and don't go in as a pick fest. And you're not a restaurant critic, quite frankly. And there's a difference between criticizing and critique. And unless you are giving a critique, I don't really want to hear the criticism. That's the honest truth of it. I don't read, well,
yeah, I mean, and hospitality is a two-way street, right? We can only, as the service industry, we can only offer hospitality. Yeah. You have to be ready and willing to accept it and be part of that transaction.
Right on. That is perfect.
I think we have time for one last quick question. And I saw that Reese in the chat said one, and you're welcome to unmute and ask your question. And we'll do it real quick at the end before we wrap up, if that's okay.
Sure. Go ahead now. Go.
Yes, please.
All right, sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Reese Flowers. I was just curious about how you, I worked in a lot of places. I had chefs who were angry. I had chefs who were, nice. And I tried to, as being executive chef now, I try to lead in a way where, how I would like to be treated. So with that, I keep, I think a good attitude goes a long way. So I try to keep a positive attitude in my kitchen. But I think when you've worked, when people have worked as long as my staff has, or just the experience that comes with it, that it's hard for, I think, man or woman to just say, I'm okay, or I'm not okay. I don't know how to, I can ask, but until they meet me in the middle, there's no way for me to help them. I can keep asking, but until they're, and not to say that they're uncomfortable. I think it's just like, that's just the mentality. When you work long enough and you're tough and you're just like, I'll be all right. How do you break that barrier or recognize when it's more than what they think it is? Or what you notice that something's wrong, but you're trying to get something out of them and they don't want to tell you, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to find ways to get past those barriers so I can help them on a level that for what you all are talking about.
So
we have-
I'll jump in. We've got a mental health amuse course that offers education around mental health, mental illness, substance use disorder, active listening skills, communication, conflict resolution that should help with some of these conversations. And also recognize one of the big things that we want people to take away from this course is that you are not the therapist. And you aren't supposed to be, but helping them get connected to resources where they can get help with a therapist or with group discussion meetings or what have you. But also know that not everyone is ready to have these conversations. And it doesn't matter how much you want to help if they are not ready and willing. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
I have a quick one too, Kate, is that
Okay, the
um,
last, right at the end.
I put these out in the bathroom. I got your back, like this one, like a bra strap. And on it, I have the suicide hotline and everything that's needed. I leave them in the bathroom. I leave them in the break room. I leave them everywhere. And I'm going to tell you, over a weekend, a stack will be gone in all 5 of my restrooms and my break room. And we have a lot of people around. So having the information laying around where someone can pick it up is a good thing too.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, I really want to thank all of you for coming for this really lively discussion. I want to thank our panelists and Reimagine for hosting this discussion. I've really learned a lot and feel really inspired by all the work that all of you are doing. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Andy to close.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Jen, Bobbin, and Erin. This was fantastic. I feel like this was such a wonderful space for folks like Reese who are in the industry themselves and folks like me, you know, who are not in the industry. And I feel like we can learn so much from the wonderful work in reimagining these spaces to be safer and braver and more comfortable for everyone. So thank you. I'm putting into the chat a link to our next series, which we're kicking off in March. The theme is climate grief and growth, and I hope you can join us for that. That will begin on March 8th. So once again, thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you especially to our panelists, and I hope to see you all in March. Take good care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.